Hello, U.S. history classes, and welcome to week 13. This is the week before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is this coming Thursday. So you only have two lessons this week. One is on the War of 1812, and this gentleman right here, James Madison. Madison is president when we go to war in 1812. Now, where we left things off last week, Thomas Jefferson had experienced some problems with Britain because of the Louisiana Purchase. Okay. Britain was upset that we were trading with France. They were really upset that we had given France $15 million for the Louisiana territory because Napoleon was going to turn around and use that money to fight France or to fight Britain, because Napoleon is trying to create an empire in Europe. And Britain had tried to get back to us or back at us by impressing our sailors to fight for them against France during this war. They were also interfering with our trade. And another thing that I didn't mention, and we're going to talk about it today, is they were also helping the Indians on the western frontier rise up against us. Okay, so things are tense between us and Britain. In fact, a lot of people are going to call this the Second War for Independence because once again, we are going against Britain, and once again, we are trying to show Britain and the world that we can take care of ourselves. Okay. Now, as you go through this presentation, please be sure you take notes on your own. There's no worksheet or anything like that that you need to fill out. So please be sure that you are jotting things down as we go through this. Okay. Now, this is kind of a complicated war. I'm going to give you the high points and kind of give you a timeline, but it could get much more complicated, much more complex than what we're going to do in this little lesson. Okay. So technically, the war begins in 1812. Okay, Madison asks Congress to declare war against Britain in 1812. Now, do not think that we are a united country on this. We are still very, disunited. We're unprepared. We have a very, very small navy and a small army. To be honest with you, things are stacked against us. All right. In fact, there are a lot of people that are thinking we're not going to come out of this war on top. It all began with an invasion of Canada. In fact, Thomas Jefferson kind of suggested, hey, if you guys invade Canada, which was part of the British Empire, it'll be real easy and we can prove how tough we are. And that totally failed. Okay. The invasion of Canada failed. And now we're going to go to war with Britain. Okay. Now, the whole reason we declare war is because England has been supporting Indians in the West in their uprising against us. They are raiding our trade ships and impressing our sailors to fight with them against Napoleon. And we don't like that. Okay. And we've tried to stop them with embargoes and everything, but the British are just not paying attention. And Madison is finally tired of it, and he has declared war on Britain. Now, like I said, it is a divided country. Not everybody is excited about this. The Federalists, for example, and I want to point this out. Madison used to be a Federalist, but he left the Federalist Party and is now a Democratic Republican. So he is at odds with his old party, the Federalists. And the Federalists oppose Madison and this war. They actually meet in Hartford, Connecticut in 1814 is when this meeting takes place. And they propose secession. They actually propose that the Federalists leave the country because they do not agree with Madison and this war. Now, the war has been going on for 2 years, but they're fed up with it. It doesn't look like we're going to win. And it's very, very unpopular. So these Federalists actually meet to propose secession. Now, nothing happens, okay, because to be honest with you, by the time things get around to them working it out, we've already won, okay? But they actually propose leaving the Union because of this war, okay? Now, like I said, the war starts in 1812, and 1812, 1813, we are not doing well. But Britain is kind of distracted because they're dealing with Napoleon in Europe. But then in 1814, once Napoleon is defeated, okay, they can focus their attention here on the United States. And in 1814, the British show up and invade Washington, D.C., and they burn the city to the ground. They burn the White House and they burn the Capitol. Okay, they burn the White House and the Capitol building, which is a huge blow to U.S. morale. Because here is the executive mansion. It's in ruins, okay? And then the seat of our legislative government, Congress, is also in ruins. All right. Now, a couple interesting stories about the burning of D.C. Number one, and like I said, they burned the White House and the Capitol. Number one, Dolly Madison, who's the wife of James Madison. Dolly Madison saves a very, very famous portrait of George Washington. It's my understanding that if you are lucky enough to get a tour of the White House, you can actually see that portrait hanging there still. It is a full-length body portrait of Washington. And Madison was already out of the city. James was already out of the city. Dolly was going to go join him. And here come the British. So I understand the story. The British are literally marching up the road to the White House to set fire. And Madison, Dolly's slaves and servants are like, we got to go, we got to go, we got to go. And she's like, not until we get this portrait out. And they hustle and they get the portrait out and they put it in a wagon and they get out of the White House and off, away from the White House just in time as the British march up and set fire to it. Now, this is how we get the term White House, okay? Because afterwards, to cover up the smoke damage and the fire damage to the house, they have to paint it white, okay? That's what's going to cover up the damage of the British attack here, okay? They do leave a portion of it unpainted, and you can still see that today to show how badly this attack was, okay, and what it did to the White House. So there is still a portion left unpainted today. So you can see how serious this was, all right? But those are the two stories, Dolly Madison saving the portrait of Washington, and that's how we get the White House. We got to cover up the burn damage once we come back into the city. Now, after the British sack Washington, okay, they moved to Baltimore. Now, Baltimore is a trading city, okay, so they moved to Baltimore. However, they are not as successful in sacking Baltimore as they do D.C. We have a fort in Baltimore called Fort McHenry, and we are actually able to stop the British at Fort McHenry in Baltimore Harbor. And on one of the British ships is an American lawyer by the name of Francis Scott Key. And Francis Scott Key is watching this bombardment of Fort McHenry, and it's going on kind of day and night. And everybody knows the British have already sacked D.C., and they just don't think Fort McHenry is going to be able to hold out much longer. Okay, so Francis Scott Key, who was an American lawyer who happened to be being held prisoner on this British ship, he goes to sleep one night and he's like, when I wake up the next morning, there's going to be a British flag flying over that fort. We're not going to survive. Well, he wakes up the next morning, and through the clouds and through the smoke, he sees not the British flag flying, but the American flag. We have held on and we have defeated the British. And Francis Scott Key writes this poem to describe what a joy it is to see that flag still flying over the rampart of Fort McHenry. And later, that poem is going to be set to music, and that poem is going to become the Star-Spangled Banner, or our national anthem. Okay? So the War of 1812 gives us our national anthem and the Star-Spangled Banner. Now, after this, the war kind of moves south to the city of New Orleans, okay? The British want to capture New Orleans. It's another important trading center. So it's 1815 now, okay? The sack of D.C. and the attack on Baltimore were in 1814. And now it's 1815, and we're down in New Orleans, okay? Now, at New Orleans, we've got a new general, Andrew Jackson. Okay, Jackson had proven his toughness early on in the War of 1812. He had actually defeated some Indian uprisings on the border. Okay, Andrew Jackson finally defeats the British for good at the Battle of New Orleans and sends them back to England. Okay, it is a pretty resounding victory. The Americans only lose 71 men. Okay, we only have 71 casualties, versus the British, who end up losing somewhere like 2,000 and some They have 2,036 casualties. So we only lose 71. The British lose 2,036. Okay, so it is a pretty solid victory for us. Now, I love this picture here of the Battle of New Orleans because you got Andrew Jackson here, okay, and then down here, these are pirates, okay. We actually had pirates helping us at the Battle of New Orleans. Jean Lafitte, who was a smuggler, a pirate operating out of New Orleans, ended up volunteering for the American side. And he brought with him some very, very valuable muskets and some flints because we're using the old flintlock muskets and ammunition. So these pirates show up, and not only are they reinforcements, but they bring with them weapons. So between Jackson and the regular American army and this reinforcement of pirates, we are able to defeat the British and send the British home for good. Now, what's really interesting is this battle technically comes after the peace agreement ending the war is signed, okay? The Treaty of Ghent is the peace agreement that will end the War of 1812. And to be honest with you, both sides were tired of fighting. The British have been fighting Napoleon over in Europe, and now they're dealing with us here in America, and they're tired. We're tired as well. So both sides kind of agree to this ceasefire, okay? Um, but we're going to claim it as a total victory because we're going to learn about the Treaty of Ghent after we learn of Jackson's victory at New Orleans. Okay, so we're going to claim this as a total victory for us. All right, but to be honest with you, both sides were just kind of tired of fighting, and we're ready to end it. Now, what do we get out of this war? Okay, why is it such a big deal? Well, with this victory, we are going to gain the Oregon Territory, okay, which is actually in the northwestern part of the country. Now, we win it after the War of 1812. We are not going to fully incorporate it until 1846, 1848, okay? That's when we actually begin to send people out there and we kind of begin to carve it up into states. We're also going to get some more states on the western boundary once those Indian uprisings are put down, okay? So places like um, Indiana, Alabama, Illinois, Mississippi, okay, they're going to become settled and going to begin the process of becoming states, okay? But we're going to gain the Oregon Territory in the northwestern part of the country. We are also going to agree to a northern boundary between us and Canada, the 49th parallel. Now, remember, Canada is still controlled by Britain, so we're working out this deal with Britain. But the 49th parallel, which is right here, okay, that is going to be the new boundary between the United States and Canada in the north. Okay. Now, there's some other practical things that we get out of the war, okay, that we definitely get a claim on the Oregon Territory, okay. The War of 1812 will give us the Oregon Territory, even though we don't begin to settle it until 1846, 1848. Remember the Federalist Party, okay? The Federalist Party opposed the war, all right, and they were going to secede from the Union. Well, once we win, okay, the war and Jackson is victorious and things like that, the Federalists are seen as unpatriotic and treasonous. Nobody wants to be a Federalist anymore. How dare they oppose this war that Madison was brave enough to fight, and how dare they talk about leaving the country? They are treasonous, they're traitors, and they're unpatriotic, and nobody wants to be a part of that party, and the party disappears. Okay? We also have an issue with African Americans. A lot of African Americans flock to the British side because the British promised them freedom and protection. And instead of us looking at how we are treating African Americans, our reaction is we need to do more to prevent them from leaving us and going to the enemy. So we see enhanced efforts to prevent future foreign invasions, okay? And that includes the construction of a fort in Virginia, Fort Monroe, okay? Fort Monroe is close to Williamsburg. It's on, it's in Newport News, Virginia Beach area, okay? So we see this string of forts go up on the border, to be honest, on the Atlantic, to try to prevent future foreign invasion because we don't want African Americans leaving us and flocking to these invaders and fighting against us. Okay, so instead of looking at how we're treating African Americans and maybe beginning to do something about that, our reaction is we're going to build these forts and prevent future foreign invasions because we don't want the African Americans leaving and fighting for them. Okay. Now, there's also some economic impact. And to be honest with you, we're going to talk more about this as we go through after we get back from Thanksgiving break and as we get closer to the American Civil War. And then after the American Civil War, we're going to have a market revolution. And there's a bunch of things that we're going to see from this. Okay. We're going to see transportation improvements like railroads and canals. In fact, railroads and canals are going to start to link the country together more. Okay. We're going to see agricultural improvements like the cotton gin and the mechanical reaper. We're going to see industrial innovations like textile mills, okay? And eventually we're going to see things like machines and factories and assembly lines, all that, although that's way down the road. We're going to see in communication improvements like the telegraph, and the telegraph is going to lead to something called the telephone way down the road. And all of this is going to be funded through tariffs, which are taxes, through the American system. And the American system is a combination of the national bank with protective tariffs on imports. Remember, we want people to buy American, but at the same time, we don't want to lead to a breakdown on trade. So we got to be careful with those tariffs. And then we're going to use some of those taxes to fund internal improvements. The government is going to set aside money to fund internal improvements, things like railroads and canals, and later on, roads. Okay? So we're going to deal more with this economic impact in the weeks to come. We're going to talk about railroads. We're going to talk about the cotton gin and what the cotton gin does. Okay? We're going to talk about the development of the factory system, the textile mills. All right. So we're going to see the impacts of this War of 1812 for years to come, especially as we move down the road and we get closer to Civil War, and then we deal with the aftermath of the Civil War as well. Okay. So in a nutshell, that's the War of 1812. It begins very, very shakily. The country is divided. Like I said, it does not appear that we're going to win this thing. We're divided. We don't have a strong navy. We don't have a strong army. We get defeated when we try to invade Canada. But then through a series of, blessings, okay, we end up turning it around and we're going to end the war on a pretty high point. And we're beginning to exert ourselves as a world power. It's going to take us a while, but we're beginning to exert ourselves as a world power as well. And that's the theme that we're going to pick up when we talk about the Monroe Doctrine, which is the last lesson that we have to worry about for this week.